Okay, we're here at the top of page 2 for section 9.6. We're dealing with rational exponents, exponents that come in the form of a fraction, where the top is the power, numerator, and the bottom, or the denominator, is the root. And you might already be noticing on these examples, what's different about these is if they can be fractions, they could also be negatives, just like we experienced earlier on with negative exponents. So let's recall what happens with the negative exponent. It flips the base. We like to say don't flip out, just flip the base. Okay, the base meaning whatever the exponent applies to. In this case, it is the fraction 8/27. So three things are going to happen. We're going to apply a negative, which flips the base. We're going to apply a power, in this case a power of 1, which really isn't going to change anything because it's just a power of 1. And we're going to apply a root of 3. So again, the instructions have not changed. We're still going to write this in radical form and then simplify from there. Okay, so rewrite in terms of a radical, so in radical form, then simplify. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the negative exponent, and I'm going to do its job, and that's going to be to flip the base. So this becomes then 27/8 to the positive 1/3. The negative exponent disappears because it's done its job. It's created the flip of the base. And then we've got a root of 3. Because the power of 1 doesn't change anything, we'll go straight to that root 3. So I've got the cube root of 27/8. And so there it is in radical form. And now we'll use what we know about radicals that we learned in the beginning of chapter 9, how to simplify this. And we can split this across the fraction, cube root of 27 over cube root of 8. And that simplifies. These are two that you should begin to recognize. Cube root of 27, 3, cube root of 8, 2. And that's our simplified version. 8/27 raised to the negative 1/3 gives you a result of 3/2. Remember, we don't stop until the radical, until there's no, until there's no negative exponents. That caught some of you on the test. You hadn't quite grasped that. You don't stop until the negative exponent is now positive, until the negative does its job. So let's try number 44. Again, same idea, except now we're raised to negative 2/3. So now we do have a power involved, and we're going to see that come into play as well. So the top, the numerator, is the power. The bottom, the denominator, is the root, or the number for the index. We've got a cube root, power of 2, or we're going to square it. It's a negative, so that flips the base. The other thing that I threw in, the reason I picked this example is because you also have a negative inside the parentheses. So whatever's happening to 64 with the negative 2/3 is going to happen to the negative 1 as well, because it's inside the parentheses. So it's not separated out. The negative 2/3 applies to both pieces in here, the negative 1 and the 64. So let's go ahead and write this. You can do this in any order. You can deal with the negative later, deal with it first, you can deal with the square, you can deal with the cube. Our goal here is to write this as a simplified, in simplified version. We're going to start by writing it as a radical. So one thing you could do is wait on the negative if you were to so choose. You can wait on that. How do you know which to do first? Well, it's going to become kind of preference. It's almost like you kind of, like in chess, you kind of think a couple moves ahead before you make the current move. So I'm looking at this going, gosh, if I flip the negative 64, then I've got a fraction to deal with. Maybe I can wait on the negative a little bit. So let's just go ahead and write this as a radical this time. So we're going to get the cube root of negative 64. Then we're going to raise that to the negative 2. Notice that there's your power, there's your root, and the negative just stayed right here. I didn't do anything with the negative, so it still shows up. Okay. The reason I chose cube root of negative 64 to do first and wait on the power is because 64 is one of those cube roots that I know, or I should be getting to know. It's one of the ones that we're supposed to become familiar with. We've already seen it in a couple examples already in this set of notes. So cube root of negative 64 is going to give me a negative 4. That's what the cube root does. And then that's still raised to a negative 2. Now maybe it's time to do the job of the negative. this flips this to negative 1/4. So there's the job of the negative exponent. It flipped it. 4, which was really 4 over 1, became negative 1/4. Okay, because a negative fraction is still just a negative. You're flipping that 4 over 1 to become 1 over 4. And now we square that, which is literally negative 1/4 times negative 1/4. That's going to give you a positive 1/16. Or you can think of it as squaring both pieces. Square the negative, square the 1, square the 4. You get a positive 1/16. Okay? And now you can try number 30, 243 raised to the negative 1/5. Got a little bit higher root there, so you want to refer back to that table from earlier on in chapter 9 of some of the ones that you want to be able to recognize. This is indeed one of the 5th roots that you want to recognize. We've got a negative in the exponent, we've got power of 1. So write it as a simplified radical and then simplify it from there, or write it as a radical and then simplify it, sorry. And pause the video here when you're ready. Take a moment to make sure your notes are clear for yourself so that you can talk it through to yourself or someone else. Great exam prep. Note any questions, anything that you're concerned about. Note it, highlight it, write it down, put a question mark beside it. So when you come to class, you can flip right through your notes and go, this is what I'm still needing help on, because that's how we want to spend our class time together. But I can't know what to help you with until you ask, so please ask. And then try this one, number 30, and see how you do. So one version of the simplified radical, or one version of the radical form would be 5th root of 243, the whole thing raised to the negative 1. You could flip it first if you wanted to, but that would be the radical version here. And then when you simplified, applied everything, you should end up at positive 1/3 as your answer. And as you scroll down the page, we'll go ahead and move the camera to kind of capture that. As you scroll down the page, you'll see some reminders from the book. They are on pages 588 through 590. Just the definition of a fractional exponent, what that represents. And then when you have a power and you have something in the numerator and the denominator of a fractional exponent. And then when you have a negative fractional exponent. So everything we just did examples of, here it is in written generic forms or formulas for you. Okay, and we'll see you on page 3 of the notes.